Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Whitfield with Drilling Contractor, and we are here at the SPE DSETS IADC Art Symposium, which is being held as part of the 2026 IADC SPE International Drilling Conference in Galveston, Texas. And with me right now is a man who spoke as part of a panel session at the symposium. Austin Groover of Nabors, he gave a great talk about the nature of collaboration and how to sort of balance collaboration in a competitive environment. We're going to go over some of the things that he mentioned as part of that discussion here today. So Austin, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So let's start with one of the main parts of your presentation, talking about sort of the ideal collaborative framework. You know, we're in an industry where there's competition. Obviously, everybody's competing for a lot of the same spaces, but you present this framework of how we can kind of collaborate within this environment. What are some of the key points about that framework?
Yeah, I think one of the important things, whenever there's an opportunity to collaborate with another peer in our industry, whether it's another service provider, another technology provider, is really to start out by setting up a framework where we start the conversation with, okay, what are some areas that we clearly are competing in, and there's not a lot of space for us to work together in this particular area. But if that's the case, what are some of the things that we're each doing separately that maybe when added together could add value to the customer? And I think having the idea and the openness to acknowledge that, one, we can't all develop every solution, and identify what our individual strengths are. And typically through that exercise and talking in multiple meetings, you can find spaces where technologies can complement each other, and that's a great space to collaborate. Or if there's a market that we can't access by each individually going at it, if we work together, we can come up with a new solution to fit a particular problem. So I think collaboration is definitely possible, as long as you're willing to have those difficult conversations up front about, okay, this is where we compete, this is where maybe we can complement each other, and then this is the scope of things that we actually want to work together on.
Now you're presenting this framework, but I start thinking about what are the challenges here. So what would you say is a big barrier, if there are any, to making this a reality?
Yeah, I think commercial misalignment is probably one of the biggest barriers. When you're thinking about developing a solution that typically will have, some value that you're delivering to the end user, which has some, number associated with that. You're going to save somebody $500 a day. Well, if both parties are expecting to each take that $500 a day home, then you're delivering a solution for $1,000 over a $500 product. So I think as part of that conversation is establishing the commercial framework and what each side is going to work on, and then what each side is comfortable as far as take home for developing a joint product. And so the commercial misalignment piece, I think, is one of the biggest barriers. But again, having those conversations up front, who has to develop what, who's going to actually deliver the service, the costs that are implicated with that, you can come up jointly with a product that the final price for the product matches the value that you're delivering. So
it's interesting that you keep bringing up conversations. It's one thing I see in this industry is that companies have their way of doing things, right? And so as they're having these conversations and sort of building their own sort of collaboration, this collaborative unit, what are some things that you think we need to rethink in sort of building this?
Yeah, definitely like how we're going to integrate with each other. I think a lot of times, what development teams will do is they'll go their separate ways and develop a solution and not really think about how those two things have to integrate with each other. So I think, establishing, what are the integration points, what's the data that needs to be shared back and forth, whose platform is it going to be on, how do we test it once we've created these solutions, and then how ultimately do we take it to a rig and not add a bunch of additional things to a driller. I think one of the worst things we can do is create new technology that then adds a bunch of additional work to people that are already very busy. So again, and I keep going back to having these conversations, it's unlikely that you'll sit down with a peer in your industry, another vendor, and come up with a solution off of a one conversation. This is definitely a process. So typically, in my experience, this takes several months of engagement at multiple levels within the organization, product line managers, sales engineers, the actual developers, your leadership, of course, from both organizations. But it really takes alignment from all layers in the organization to get a good end product and something that is really a win-win for everybody.
Well, Austin, thank you for taking the time to sort of give us this insight about the nature of collaboration. I mean, it's just fascinating as we see more and more efforts within this industry, people working together. So it's cool to hear about this. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for visiting drillingcontractor.org.